of what happens in the second scene of King Lear. You know, the first scene, so important. It's called the exposition, exposition. So the events that lead to the plot of the play are established. And of course, this is the scene in which the kind of subplot is established as well. So there's that word exposition, and that means kind of introduction to, outline of, and the subplot, of course, in King Lear is, if the main plot is the story of Lear and his daughters, the subplot is the story of Gloucester and his sons. Okay, so there's those two parallel stories. This scene is built around two soliloquies. They're both delivered by Edmund. Don't forget what a soliloquy is. It's a speech or a monologue in which the private thoughts of the character are revealed to the audience. And we learn in this speech the powerful sense of injustice that Edmund feels. Okay, he is an illegitimate child. He's not a child. He was born illegitimate. And because of the fact that he was born illegitimate, he's been excluded from his what he would regard as his rights. His father, he cannot be his father's heir. He cannot inherit anything from his father because of the fact that he is not born within marriage. Gloucester, we learn, had an affair with Edmund's mother when his brother was a baby. So we find out that Edgar is about a year older than Edmund. So obviously Edgar's mother had a baby, and while the baby was young, and maybe the mother was, looking after the baby, Gloucester, as a young man, wasn't very nice and went off and slept with Edmund's mother, and Edmund was the result of that affair. Now, when we first hear Edmund speaking, there is an element of sympathy that we have for him. That sense that he's being unjustly treated, and I'll go to the quotes in a couple of minutes, that sense that he's being unjustly treated, especially to a modern audience, and we're allowed to interpret the play based on the way the world is today as opposed to the way the world was when Shakespeare wrote the play, that sense of unfairness and injustice, like we can empathise with him, we can feel sorry for him, we can get why he's frustrated. But at the same time, when you hear what he has to say in this speech, we must recognise that he is someone to be wary of. He is sinister. He certainly says he's going to be capable of doing really nasty things to achieve his goals. He's scheming, manipulative, duplicitous. We know those words, we've used them in class. And he's resolute. Now, that's again, not a criticism, resolute, but in the way, in his character and what he's willing to do, it's something that makes him, as I said, a character who would be a villain of the play. So resolute means determined, will not be deterred from his path, will keep on doing whatever he needs to do to get us to achieve his goals. So what he wants to do is replace his brother as his father's heir, and then once he's done that, get rid of his father and become the Earl of Gloucester, thus transforming his future. So that means manipulating his father Gloucester. Now Gloucester, when he comes into this scene, is raging about Lear and Lear's irrational behaviour in the previous scene, and how he's banished Kent, and how he's fallen out with France. But of course Gloucester, when that was all happening, kept his mouth shut. And Gloucester, we know from the start of the play, we're not supposed to really like him at the start of the play. He's somewhat of a coward. He'll have these feelings but won't speak up in front of Lear. Doesn't have the bravery, the nobility, or the sense of duty, willingness to sacrifice his own interest that Kent or Cordelia have. But when Gloucester comes in, Edmund manipulates him, and he gives him this letter which he pretends was written by his brother. And of course, it's a forged letter, and that forged letter purports to show that Edgar wants to get rid of his dad. The letter, which Edmund says was written by Edgar, says, oh, well, look, Dad's old, I'm fed up waiting for him to die so I can inherit. So in the letter, Edgar is supposedly asking Edmund to help him get rid of Gloucester so that he can become the Earl. Now, this is all nonsense, and it would be very easily disproved, but Gloucester is a man who is impetuous, and he is a man who makes foolish decisions, and like Lear, he just accepts that his son is betraying him without any reasoned, rational considerations. In other words, he lashes out. Same way Lear lashes out at Cordelia. Instead of Lear stopping and listening to what Cordelia has to say, his ego causes him to be affronted by her perfectly reasonable, I love your majesty according to my bond, no more nor less. But here we see that Gloucester is absolutely absolutely incapable of dealing with this, apparent betrayal by his son in a calm way. And he overreacts, because where Lear is egotistical and proud and hubristic, Gloucester is impetuous. So he condemns his son Edgar. That is an act of injustice. And of course, the fact that he's so impetuous makes him the perfect candidate for the manipulative machinations of Edmund. In other words, Edmund is a schemer, and he's able to manipulate and influence Gloucester with great ease, because Gloucester's weakness makes that possible. So Edmund persuades Gloucester to, come back later on and eavesdrop on a conversation between him and his brother. And Edmund's going to pretend that he wants to defend his brother, but in fact what he's doing is setting Edgar up. And we know all that because of dramatic irony, of course. Very important that we understand that dramatic irony is a very important, very important dramatic technique used in the play. So in soliloquy, we know what Edmund's up to, but of course, Gloucester doesn't know, and neither does Edgar. So when Gloucester leaves, Edmund immediately turns around to the audience. His duplicity, that idea of him being two-faced, being able to pretend to be something that he's not, again emerges. And he turns to the audience and releases another soliloquy in which he boasts about how weak his father is, and how anybody who is weak deserves to be punished, okay? And that is how the scene ends. Edgar comes in, and Edmund tells him to run away because his father is angry with him, and tells him to arm himself. And we know that Edgar's innocent, but we know that Edgar's been set up for a fall, and we know that Edmund is intelligent and manipulative and dangerous, and that's the crux of the scene. The key quotes: the great disease metaphor, wherefore should I stand in the plague of custom? The plague is a lethal disease. Custom is the traditional way that illegitimate children are treated. Edmund is saying, why should I allow my life to be ruined simply because of an accident of birth? I'm not going to. I am as good as my brother. My dimensions are as well compact as Honest Madam's issue. Honest Madam is Gloucester's wife. Her issue is her son. That son is Edgar. I'm as good as Edgar. Why should I allow my life to be ruined simply because he was born within marriage and I wasn't? So Edgar, I'm going to take what you have. I must have your land. That means he's going to usurp or steal Edgar's rightful position. He's going to use whatever techniques or whatever strategy he has to in order to achieve his goals. He wants to swap places with Edgar, and he says, Edmund the base shall top the legitimate, a gorgeous example of Shakespeare's use of juxtaposition and contrast. So we have Edmund, he's at the bottom of society, Edgar's at the top. He wants to swap them around so that he becomes the one with all of the privilege, and he doesn't care that that's going to destroy his brother's life. And I suppose it's important to remember as well that Edmund doesn't hate Edgar. He doesn't have any particular malicious intent towards Edgar. Edgar's just in his way. So when Edgar's in his way, Edmund will dispose of him. This is the trick, the ruse. It is a letter from my brother that I've not read, and for so much as I've perused, I find it not fit for your o'erlooking. It's a lovely example of him being extremely manipulative and duplicitous, pretending that he's trying to, protect his father from something when in fact he's setting him up. This is Gloucester's impetuous, reaction, calling his son Edgar a villain, not once, not twice, not once but twice, and then calling his son also a brute, not once but twice. And we have this idea that Gloucester, it's just too easy for Edmund. Gloucester's like Italy against New Zealand last night in the World Cup. He's not putting up any defence. It's just a joke. It's too easy, and Edmund enjoys manipulating. And he finishes with this wonderful, famous pair of quotes from the soliloquy. This is the excellent foppery of the world. If I was you, I would just learn those two words. That when we are sick in fortune, often the surfeit of our own behaviour, we make guilty of our disasters, the sun, the moon, and the stars. What's he laughing at? He's saying, this is how stupid people are, that when things go wrong for them, it's usually their own fault. So my father is going to suffer because of the way he treated me and because of his own behaviour when his wife had just had a baby, but now he's going to blame everything but himself for his misfortune. Just learn excellent foppery. It's a great example of what we call an oxymoron, O-X-Y-M-O-R-O-N, a particular technique that Shakespeare uses repeatedly in this play. Those two words, excellent and foppery, shouldn't go together. Foppery means stupidity, foppery means idiocy, and how can idiocy be excellent? Well, it can if you're the person manipulating the idiot. And what he's doing is boasting that Gloucester's idiocy makes it easy for Edmund to control him. And he goes on in the same speech to describe Gloucester as a credulous father and a brother noble whose nature is so far from doing harms that he suspects none, on whose foolish honesty my practices ride easy. And of course, that's the other oxymoron from that scene. You know, you can see Edmund's corruption. He says, to be honest is to be a fool. That's what he's learnt in life. His father is credulous, will believe anything. His brother is so good that he doesn't think there are bad people in the world. This makes both his father and his brother vulnerable, and he's going to exploit them. And then he finishes with this really, really famous and brilliant, line. Let me, if not by birth, have lands by wit. All with me's meet that I can fashion fit. And what he's saying there, you've heard of Machiavelli, I hope. His words are Machiavellian. For him, what he's saying is, for me, the ends... justify the means. I don't care what I have to do to get what I want, as long as I get what I want. If I'm not going to have wealth and privilege by the nature of my birth, then I'm going to use my brain to get what I want. He's a very modern character, Edmund, In Shakespeare's time, this would have been seen as awful because you're meant to know your place in society and accept your place. So this was seen as being something to condemn him for. To a modern audience, there's a lot of people who look at that and go, well, he'd fit in very well in our capitalist world. Hope you found that useful. If you do that for me.